Something for you. Ever since the Big Bang, the universe has been drifting and expanding. The birth and death of stars leave an aftermath of galaxies, planets, and even living organisms. This includes the sun, planets, and our solar system. At the center, the sun swept in smaller elements like hydrogen and helium. Farther away, heavier elements formed planets. Based on the core accretion model, gravity was the driver coalescing Earth from a cloud of dust. Though Earth was neatly orbiting the Sun as a rocky mass 4.5 billion years ago, no organism could survive there. Radiation from the recent supernova kept the planet extremely hot, its surface molten, and oxygen was non-existent. Plus, incredibly massive meteorites and asteroids frequently slammed onto the surface. The Earth got so hot it began melting. Heavier material sank to the bottom. Lighter stuff rose to the top. Some elements evaporated. This transformation created the Earth's layered core and mantle, crust, atmosphere, and magnetic field. Without it, Earth would be blasted by harmful rays from the sun. Before you learn everything about the Earth's history, hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This way you'll be the first to learn about updates that appear on Googleplex. In the late Hadean Eon, the Earth was still in its late bombardment stage. There is no life. Temperatures are extremely hot, with frequent volcanic activity and hellish environments. The atmosphere is nebular, possibly early oceans or bodies of liquid water. The moon is formed around this time, probably due to a protoplanet's collision into Earth. In addition, there's reason to believe that these collisions could have sparked the chemical building blocks for life, DNA. Eventually, the climate on Earth became more stable. Instead of a molten state, the Earth started to cool down. Water vapor condensed to form oceans, and the Earth cooled down enough to create continents. Vale Barra became Earth's first supercontinent. Photosynthetic organisms appeared between 3.2 and 2.4 billion years ago and began enriching the atmosphere with oxygen. Single-celled organisms consumed the sun's energy. As a waste product, this cyanobacteria eventually filled the oceans and atmosphere with oxygen. Earth now had an oxygenated atmosphere for new life to flourish, but it wasn't cyanobacteria. Oxygen was toxic for them. Much life on Earth probably died out as its levels rose in what is known as the oxygen catastrophe.
Hey, it's Mr. Mabry, and we're going to do a quick overview of the geologic time scale. You're going to want to copy this whole diagram down into your notes so you can get a big picture view of how the Earth has been created all the way to this present day, over 6 billion years in about 4 or 5 minutes. Here we go. The first era we're going to talk about is the Precambrian time period. This is a super boring time period for most people, but I think it's one of the most exciting. Even though over here it looks like it's just a little piece of the puzzle, that is a lie. In actuality, this covers over 3 billion years, which means if I drew this to scale, the Precambrian would go all the way up to about 88% of the entire time the Earth's been around, and the remaining 12% right here would be all of these things crammed into 12%. That's crazy. So what happened during the Precambrian? Well, all this dust and debris was flying around in outer space and sort of glommed together due to gravity and intermolecular forces out in space. And as it spun around the sun, the moon was kicked off, and all these heavy metals were sinking into the Earth's core, and eventually we have land masses, and we have volcanic activity, we have meteors hitting from outer space, until eventually, some reason, bacteria was like, this sounds awesome. I'm going to come to life in these primordial old oceans. And the atmosphere was stinky. It was full of all sort of noxious fumes, but especially methane, a gas we don't have today. And as time went on, just billions of years, even with this bacteria, it was setting the stage for life. And life came about as we transitioned to our next stage, the Paleozoic, or early life. and an event occurred called the Cambrian explosion. And it wasn't a bad explosion, it was a good explosion. It was an explosion of all of these guys into the world. And all of a sudden, bacteria was no longer the only ones in the ocean. There was fish in the ocean, and there were amphibians in the ocean, and then on land there was finally land plants occurring, and insects, and by the end there was even reptiles. And as this was occurring, all these land masses that were being formed from the crust were starting to come together to form this huge supercontinent that you and I know as Pangaea. So that was forming during the Paleozoic. By the end, though, something crazy happened. This extinction event we call the Permian extinction occurred, and 90% of all living things was just wiped out. We're not totally sure how this happened. We think it might have been due to an ice age occurring at the time that caused sea levels to drop. Maybe it was Pangaea forming. We're not exactly sure. There was oxygen levels in the atmosphere that were fluctuating. But this ushered in a new age we call the Mesozoic age, or Middle Age. And during that age, the reptiles really came to flourish. And this is that classic age of dinosaurs that you think about. It was tropical by the middle of the era, and Pangaea started to break up into these larger supercontinents. But then by the end, a huge meteorite came and blasted into Mexico, threw all this debris into the air, and what we know is that the dinos didn't make it. And so a bunch of them died off 65 million years ago, which ushered us into our final age, the Cenozoic age. And this is an age where mammals really came to flourish. Birds also began to be more predominant. Though mammals and birds were both present here, a lot of grazing mammals in the grasslands came to be and spread throughout the world, and the continents moved to their modern and current locations where they are today. The one thing worth noting, you might be asking, well, where's humanity in this history of the earth? Well, we're at the very, very top. I mean, we came in a second ago, about 100 to 160,000 years ago, which is nothing. Most of Earth's history got along just fine by itself over the last 6 billion years. Thanks for watching.
Vale Barra became Earth's first supercontinent. Photosynthetic organisms appeared between 3.2 and 2.4 billion years ago and began enriching the atmosphere with oxygen. Single-celled organisms consumed the sun's energy. As a waste product, this cyanobacteria eventually filled the oceans and atmosphere with oxygen. Earth now had an oxygenated atmosphere for new life to flourish, but it wasn't cyanobacteria. Oxygen was toxic for them. Much life on Earth probably died out as its levels rose in what is known as the oxygen catastrophe. Imagine a dominant species polluting the planet until extinction. Resistant forms survived and thrived, and some developed the ability to use oxygen to increase their metabolism and obtain more energy from the same food. At this time, methane was more abundant in the atmosphere. One thing that methane did very well was trap heat in the atmosphere. It's one of the most efficient greenhouse gases. So when oxygen combined with methane, it produced carbon dioxide. All of a sudden, the greenhouse effect wasn't as strong. As a result, the whole planet froze. It was snowball Earth for the next 300 million years. As oxygen filled the atmosphere, Earth's ozone layer thickened. Before the presence of an ozone layer, life was restricted to shallow water. Because water shielded harmful radiation, that's where life existed. Eventually, a thicker ozone layer enabled life to diversify on land. 541 million years ago, hard-shelled invertebrates originated in the oceans, and life got more diverse from there. Next came the age of fish, when thousands of fish species arose. Plants and fungi were the first to venture out of the water, requiring them to adapt to new conditions on dry terrain. Some fish stayed in close proximity to land and gradually adapted to life there, simultaneously developing lungs. Amphibians were the first vertebrates to make the move to land. The transition to life on land benefited these creatures because there was no predators to begin with, and food was plentiful. That was the start of the age of amphibians. Then, 250 million years ago, was the Permian extinction, which caused extinction of 95% of all living species. When Earth's climate became hotter and drier, rainforests collapsed, triggering the age of reptiles. Unanimously depicted by Tyrannosaurus rex, locked in eternal conflict with mortal enemy Triceratops. Because reptiles evolved to dry land conditions, they gained a unique ecological advantage. Also notable is that Pangaea existed as one supercontinent in this era. Dinosaurs lived on one supercontinent. Plate tectonics were the mechanism that eventually tore continents apart. Don't forget that dinosaurs existed for 160 million years, so continental drift gradually rifted dinosaurs apart. From between the feet of stomping dinosaurs, ratty animals scurry about, cue an asteroid impact, and the age of mammals begins. Mammals evolved from mammal-like reptiles called therapsids about 200 million years ago, and birds from small theropod dinosaurs about 150 million years ago. This evolution of both mammals and birds accelerated after the extinction of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago, when a 6-mile-wide asteroid struck Earth just off the Yucatan Peninsula. This ejected vast quantities of particulate matter and vapor into the air that occluded sunlight, inhibiting photosynthesis. 75% of all life, including the non-avian dinosaurs, became extinct. Poor dinosaurs, imagine that if the meteor never hit Earth, we would be intelligent dinosaurs. The first true mammals evolved in the shadows of dinosaurs and other large archosaurs. When dinosaurs roamed the Earth, mammals were very small and were probably nocturnal to escape predation. And because dinosaurs went extinct, mammals emerged as the largest land animals at the time. Creatures like Ambulocetus took to the oceans to eventually evolve into whales, whereas some creatures like primates took to the trees. Then, just several million years ago, we believe that human life began to evolve. Apes remained in trees for their primary food source. Eventually, grass began to spread in places like the African savanna, and there were fewer trees. This forced apes to walk to new food sources. With their heads above the grass to see predators, apes evolved by walking on 2 legs. It also helped to have their hands available when they were traveling. Brain size increased rapidly, and by 2 million years ago, the first animals classified in the genus Homo had appeared. They were known for sharpening objects with silicon rocks.